human has moved from one place to other in search of foods and resources since primitive era till now. History tells so. This is globalism. Globalism is quite natural. It takes place without any concrete plan. But when countries plan the movement of people, the movement of human resources, along with the movement of trade, capital, information, this becomes globalization. There is a difference between globalism and globalization. Globalization is a structured movement of people from one country to other country or to many countries. Globalization became a global phenomenon, a global system, prominent after 1990s when most of the countries started opening up their economic and political boundaries for other countries. It's the process whose economic dimensions involve increases in the flows of trade, capital, information technology and human across the borders. Globalization is characterized by an intensification of cross-border trade, cross-border activity, and increased financial and foreign direct investment flows promoted by rapid liberalization, rapid privatization, and advances in information technology. India became a globalized nation in 1990s when the government of India passed a new bill for new economic policy, that is in short known as NEP. Globalization establishes its roots in economic trade for centuries. Archaeologists have been unearthing hard evidences of trade and exchange between cultures thousands of miles apart. Globalization basically takes place in three areas. These are economic area, political area, and cultural area. And there is always a movement of people, movement of human. We should not forget that human moves along with the movement of capital, movement of trade from one country to other country in globalization. There are arguments for globalization. International trade and investment have been the engines of world growth, world economic growth over the past 50 years. This is one of the achievements. This is seen as one of the achievements for globalization. The tons of goods traded around the world have grown up by 16 times since 1950, reflecting the lowering of tariff barriers. This is how the peoples can access the end products, the finished goods from around the world. The many benefits of that growth have been shared by countries, various countries. The countries that are getting poorer are those that are not open to world trade, notably many nations in Africa and Latin America. There are even arguments against globalization. Globalization increases the gap between rich and poor countries, it is said so. Over the past 10 years, the number of people earning $1 a day or less has remained static at 1.2 billion, while the number earning less than $2 a day has increased from 2.5 billion to 2.8 billion people. The gap in incomes between the 20% of the richest and the poorest countries has grown from 30 to 1 in 1960 to 82 to 1 in 1995. Trade between industrialized countries and developing countries is of relative small range. For example, the USA's trade with developing countries is only about 4% of its GDP. Globalization is empowering corporations at the expense of nation-state. Multinational corporations, MNCs, are extremely powerful, and many MNCs are larger than nation-states. This damages the national capital and the national players. Multinational companies exploit workers in countries with inferior labor standards. Small farmers and businesses in various countries have difficulties competing with MNCs. Rich countries export their polluting industry to poor countries which have less strict environmental standards. This is one of the bad impact of globalization over environment. Processes of industrialization are leading to global warming and a damage of the atmospheric quality. Developing countries have been excluded from the Kyoto Protocol, providing a loophole for transnational companies. Resource industries such as forestry, mining, and fisheries exploit the resources of poor countries with little regard to either the long-term cost to the country in terms of the loss of national resources or the environment. There is, of course, a positive effect of globalization. The transport ideas, people's goods and wealth across the national borders, international trade has in fact increased. Positive effect on economies, making poor nation wealthier, is also one of the good aspect of globalization. Globalization helps improves quality of life for lower income people in developing nations. This is also one of the positive aspect of globalization. What are the negative effects of globalization? Critics criticize multinational corporations for driving local businesses out of business. They can cause inequality between countries. They can exploit countries that are not very wealthy. Some accuse them of having too great an effect on policies, which they can will to get their own way without regard of whether or not it's good for the world at large.